You're listening to the Sisterhood of Limitless Living podcast. I'm your host, Dr. April Moreno. I'm a public health specialist focused on integrative wellness and autoimmune living, supporting the community of women, where I help you to live your best quality of life through being your best self-advocate. Let's get started. Today I wanted to tell you about our new organization. It is a 501c3 nonprofit organization in Southern California. It's called the Autoimmune Community Institute. We're dedicated to health equity in autoimmune disease research, policy, and support for the communities of color, the underrepresented communities out there that don't often see themselves in disease community events, for example, and they don't see a face like theirs in their community. And we are dedicated to community-based participatory research. We're dedicated to serving the community, for example, cooling programs, and also delivery services during the COVID-19 pandemic. For example, the immunocompromised community not being able to go out into public spaces due to disability or immunocompromised status from disease-modifying drugs. And we provide delivery services of essential goods, food, masks, protective gear, hand sanitizer, and so on to these communities. So please consider a donation to the Autoimmune Community Institute. You can find us at ACI, as in Autoimmune Community Institute, acicommunity.org. Being here, thank you for listening in to this episode of the Sisterhood of Limitless Living. Today we have a great episode. We're going to be talking to someone who is in the healthcare space, who is also a businesswoman, who is in the entrepreneurial space. I just feel like we're so similar. And, she's going to be sharing her experience with us about her autoimmune journey and how she has reached out to help other people as a result of these experiences and through her own business as a physician. So she's a physician, she's a researcher, and she's a social impact entrepreneur. So I want to introduce you to Dr. Omolara Uwemedimo. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much, April. I am so excited to be on this podcast. It's just, as I talked to you before, I have a newer autoimmune journey, and just seeing your podcast was really empowering. So I'm really happy to be here on the podcast.
Thank you so much. I love it when I hear that people are able to benefit in some way from this podcast, because, I share through my experiences, I thought I needed something like this. I know that when I was in the community with my disease, that I wasn't seeing people of color. I wasn't seeing anyone that looked remotely like me at all. Yeah. And we needed some more representation and diversity out there. And we also needed a positive space.
Yes. Yeah. I like to say not just a safe space, but a brave space, because, right, it's scary sometimes to share. But then there's so much power in it. Once you have shared, it's like, that a release. So I'm happy that you're doing this work.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. It's so good to have met you recently. And please tell us a little bit more about you and the work you've been doing, and then we'll go into your experiences.
Yeah. So I am, I like to say about where I come from, because I think that's always important. So I'm a born and bred New Yorker, but I'm the daughter of Nigerian immigrants. And my background is pretty much wanting to have been a physician for, I would say, since I was a little girl, a pediatrician. Actually, I knew what type of physician I wanted to be at that age. And it really, a lot of what shaped my interest around doing the work that I do is really a genuine care for a genuine, I think, thought around injustice, and on seeing injustice specifically when I would travel back home with my parents to Nigeria, and seeing that. And initially the first part of my career through medical school, through residency, even before I started practicing, was around global health and working abroad in Africa primarily. And then ultimately over time with personal, baby, husband, all of that, I ended up staying here in America and doing more research. I really got involved in kind of global health research and then got involved in education. And so in the last decade, I've really spent most of my professional life I've been practicing, but as an academic pediatrician. So I am able to incorporate my research and am able to incorporate taking care of patients. And my interest and my love is really around racial ethnic minority patients and immigrant patients, and really trying to think about how do you provide care in a way that is going to address all of the needs, even for the most marginalized. And so that's kind of my initial story pre-MS. And in doing that, as you know, kind of the academic lifestyle can be a bit stressful. There's teaching, for me, there's also patient care, and then there is the writing and the research. And I was doing it all, and I'm a mom of two, and I got burnt out in the fall of 2018. And so with that work, I actually stopped practicing clinically and wasn't sure if I would practice again, because I wasn't sure if it was me or if it was just my environment. And then, 6 months later, I actually ended up in the hospital, which we'll talk about, with MS. But the thing about my journey, I would say, is what MS did for me is it stopped me. It said, sit down, Omolara. And in that time, I was able to really reflect on what was my zone of genius, what were the things that actually I loved to do, and what was I just doing because it looked good, right? That's what I was supposed to do. And that's when the entrepreneurship bug hit me, and the idea of creating something with the idea of doing it the way I wanted to. First, it was the clinical work and creating a practice that could combine my love of working with community partners and practicing medicine and creating my Strong Children Wellness. And then it was me reflecting on my personal journey and understanding that there would be other women, other Black women in particular, who probably were facing this whole burnout, professional and personal. And that's when my Melanin Medicine and Motherhood was born. So that's kind of the journey that I've had in a really concise way over the past 30 plus years.
Right. Yeah, I love it. I love the fact that, those of us with autoimmune diseases out there, we are not necessarily stopping our lives. We've actually thought about how to continue our lives in a way that really speaks to who we are, continuing to speak and live in our purpose, and live with this continued spark of inspiration. Yeah. It doesn't stop us. And I love it.
Not at all. No, it does not. Clearly. There's some modifications that need to be made, but nope, does not stop us.
Right. Yeah. So that's why I'm calling this the Sisterhood of Limitless Living, this podcast. And it's just, this is the community that I love being part of, because we are limitless. We have to make changes. Things don't always look the way we think they're going to be, but we make it happen.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit more about the difficulties you started to experience in 2018. You said 2018?
2018 was when I was burnt out. So clearly there was a lot of stress. And then in May of 2019 was when I was hospitalized. So I can talk a lot about kind of that process. So basically the experience really was so sudden. And I know for many of us with multiple sclerosis, kind of extremely sudden. But I remember it very well because it was the week of my daughter's birthday. And what was happening was I was doing I do a lot of work around immigration and immigration advocacy. And I was being asked to come into New York City. I'm from New York, into the city in Manhattan. And I was being asked to come a lot to do a lot of advocacy and press and media. And during that time, I was taking the subway. And I remember just bumping into people all the time, like extraordinarily, like way too much. And I just thought, why am I clumsy? Maybe I'm not used to taking the subway anymore. What's going on? But as the week progressed, I was starting to see that I was actually not getting vertigo, not the room spinning, but almost like a cruise ship. that was how the room was, and starting to feel nauseous. And then also realizing I had to hold on to things, like when I was coming down the stairs or when I was standing. And over the course of the week, I was able to throw my daughter's birthday party without problem, but people kind of looking at me like, Omolara needs to sit down. And the Monday, which was a week after the clumsiness had started, I literally was just having problems even standing up straight. And then I went to the doctor, and they said that I had driven in, and they said, you cannot drive, you have to go straight to a neurologist. We don't know what's going on, but you cannot you cannot operate any vehicles. And I went to the neurologist, and then that same day, my parents had to pick me up. It felt so so humbling. My parents came and picked me up and drove me to the neurologist. And when I got into the office, I was sitting down on the hospital bed, on the bed, the exam table, and she said to me, okay, stand up so we can do a test of your walking. And when I stood up, I literally almost crashed to the floor without them catching. If they didn't catch me, I would have fallen on the floor. And so she was like, we're admitting you. I'm not sure what this is, but we're admitting you. And over the course of initially 3 days of, neurology exams and CTs and imaging and MRIs and failed LPs and all of that, lumbar punctures. Yeah. I finally got the diagnosis. I remember it really well. Specifically, I remember it really well because they knew I was a physician. And so I knew it because I've done that face. So I knew something was because I knew that walk, I knew the sit down, I knew all of those procedures when you're going to actually share bad news. Mm. And they told me I had a lesion in my brain, and they weren't sure if it was cancer or if it was, inflammatory disease. And so they were doing LPs to be able to figure that out. But it was humbling because I was happy in a way because I knew that there was something that was the cause of this. And then that's when all of the pictures of what does this mean? What if this is cancer? What if this is this? And also kind of seeing my life kind of just shift in terms of not working, in terms of I brought the computer, April. I brought the computer to the hospital because I was like, well, I can't walk, but I can still do my work. Yeah. And then as I sat down, every time I'd open it up, the dizziness and the nausea would come. So I couldn't do the work either. Yeah. So that was kind of the story. And then when they found out it was MS, I stayed in the hospital for another probably 10 days. Getting my medicine, but I was discharged with a walker, and they kind of were like, at least from hearing my stories about my lifestyle, they were like, if you continue on that lifestyle, we're not sure how often you're going to be ending up in this hospital. Mm-hmm. So something has to change. And I just remember walking back into my house with the walker and just feeling like life was going to be different from this day on. And so that was kind of the experience.
Wow. So tell me more about how they came to the conclusion that you had MS. So they saw the lesion, and then they took all these different lumbar punctures.
Yeah. And they took some blood work to look for tumor markers and other things. But the biggest thing was the lumbar puncture, where they were able to see oligoclonal bands. Mm-hmm. And they said that was definitive. And then they had some other markers to just rule out, I think maybe optic neuritis, rule out other things. I can't remember. I used to remember it, but other antibodies in terms of different types of MS-like syndromes. Mm-hmm. So that was probably the definitive thing. Mm-hmm. I remember advocating for myself as a woman of color because I think that was probably one of the hardest parts, right? You're a physician, but then you're in this patient role, and I think in this climate right now, in terms of understanding structural racism and feeling like everyone needed to know because I needed to protect myself, I'm Dr. Omolara Uwemedimo. It almost felt like something I had to do because I was scared that people were not going to either provide me with all of the information or not, go through everything. I remember having some of my colleagues, they came in and they were even worse than I was. They were like, well, can I see the results? What's happened with this? What's happened with this? And it just felt like, even though it was from a place of uh, meaning, a place of love, it also felt kind of just traumatic in a way of realizing that without that degree and that empowerment, I just think about other women of color in my place and how, the system can fail us often and not give us the either diagnosis we deserve, the information we need, and how to navigate these kind of things in a way that breeds dignity.
Wow, that's such an important point. I just had a flashback and I didn't even realize it right around the time I was diagnosed as well, that they knew I was a student. They knew I was working on my doctorate. And I remember that she was giving me the same information. She's like, well, it could be this or it could be that. There's a recent study that says this. And this much percent, this is the likelihood that it could be this or it could be that. And I was just like, I really appreciated that. And I'm just wondering, like, how many people get that opportunity to hear from a specialist about, this is the possibility that you could have this or that. And, we just saw this new study and, it kind of changes the way that we're going to approach this next. And I really appreciate that now. And I don't know if everyone gets that.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting. I just remember my nurses. I remember some of them being like, so, it's interesting because I'm honestly happy. There's some things I would take away, of course, if I could, but I'm honestly happy for that experience because it just, I know, has made me such a better physician to be on that side and realize the frustrations and the challenges, specifically even in the hospital system in general, but then in general, just in terms of the patient-provider relationship and how scary things are for you when there's a lack of information, it's lopsided, and how you feel not defensive, but you feel, there's a constant anxiety and fear because you don't have all the information and they do. And it seems like you're always trying to pull, what about, is this back yet? Is this here yet? And so I do think that what it's done, and I don't wish anybody to get hospitalized, but I do wish as physicians, we start to learn more about how that feels, and so that we can provide care that is really more compassionate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so important. Compassionate, culturally competent care, being able to explain things in the language that people will understand, the vocabulary, the jargon or no jargon that they need. So while you were there, were they giving you the steroids before they released you from the hospital? They began that whole process with you?
Yeah, so they did actually. They actually did give me my steroids while I was there. I was very worried about what was this gonna be like, but the amount of like dramatic relief, by I think it was day 3, was like, oh my gosh, like there is a road. It's very humbling, like to be pushed to the bathroom and to like, couldn't actually even walk, like, that was very difficult.
Mm-hmm. So you've been able to restore, or we can pause. Do you need it? Were you able to restore your ability to walk after this? Is it kind of like in stages? Do you have flare-ups? Do you have relapses? What has it been like for you? Have things changed over time?
Yeah, so things have changed quite dramatically. I think one of the biggest things right now has been the fatigue has been probably far and away, because I would push myself. I'd say, I can stay up, I can do this, and realizing how important sleep was for my well-being, in terms of me being able to function, and not have that cognitive kind of fog that came across. And I'm not used to that, and as in our professions where our brain is like the bodies of athletes, right? That's the thing that like we use. Totally. And so it's like, no, not the brain, not the brain. And you know, and really being able to navigate, how do I manage all the things that I want to do, and still have this fatigue. So in the beginning, I would not ignoring the fatigue. You kind of can't, but it was kind of like almost demoralizing to myself about like, I should be able to push through this. Like, why is this happening? What I think that has been helpful is being gracious with myself, I think. And also knowing what is it that I can use to help me. So, you know, really now understanding the importance of writing things, the importance of using my calendar, the importance of actually getting help. And so my husband has been remarkable in terms of him taking on a lot and doing a lot of some of the chores and things like that, which I like, because I'm like, yeah, there should be no gender equity, right? But so he's really taken that on and let me do the things that I love, which are really around like making sure the kids, in terms of their education, in terms of their after school activities, you know, and so we've been able to navigate it in that way. I think the hardest part has been the overachiever in me and saying like, if I can't finish it tonight. That I think is always in the back of my head. Like, why this is due this time and I'm supposed to get, and being able to say, look, I thought it would be due at that time. I'm going to have to send, and being okay with that, because I know that the product, I know what I'm going to do is going to be spectacular. And so I think that has been helpful. I struggled a lot with sharing my my disorder, but I realized there was a certain freedom that happened. And definitely when I realized that my passion was to help other women, I realized it would be, for me, I couldn't do it in a way that was in integrity for me, with hiding this like huge part of my life. And so I think that was a game changer when I decided pretty early that I wasn't going to kind of hide this at this point, because I just felt it would take too much energy for me, honestly, to do it. It's a lot sometimes.
Yeah, it is hard. Okay, so then the next question I would have for you is related to, how did you develop a positive attitude? You know, some people get really angry at their disease. They're really upset. They feel like it has taken their life away. Mm-hmm. What would you say to somebody who's really feeling that feeling of like, this is just taken away and I'm in denial even. I don't even want to address, I don't want to look at this.
Yeah. So it's funny because that definitely comes up. Okay. I think that comes up, you know, at times. It's not something that goes away, but it's something that we can definitely manage. And part of, you know, in the coaching that I do, the framework of my work is really around thriving, right? And I figure that there are 3 things that I think are really important. I think it's clarity, and being clear about what your purpose is and mission is and vision is, because once you have that, you know that, especially after a disease and you're able to push that together, then you know, like, despite all of that you're able to, despite what you're going through, if you can see where you're going to be in 2035, hold on one second. Give me 1 second. Sorry. Sure. I'm so sorry.
No problem.
I know you can edit it. So I think that one of the things that I talked about in the framework is really around clarity, around your purpose, your mission, and your vision. Mm-hmm. It's really important now, after having the disease, to be able to see what that looks like with the disease in my life, right? And once that vision showed up for me, that was kind of like, okay, that's where I'm going to be. Mm-hmm. So now what do I need to do in 2030 to get there? What do I need to do in 2025 to get there? What do I need to do in 2020 to get there? And I think, like we talked a little bit, we commiserated about the overachiever in both of us, that well, if that's what I have to do, then that's what I'm going to do. And really thinking about who is it that I need. So clarity is really important to give you that motivation to move forward. Then I think the second part is the confidence and skills, right? So how do I develop routines that are going to work for me? How do I set boundaries, not just to limit people, but also to make space for that vision? And also, how do I master my time in a way that makes sense for me, that is efficient? What am I spending time on that I know is not a strength of mine? So it's draining me and it's happening really slowly because it's not something that is a strength of mine. Who can I delegate it to? Can I eliminate it? Can I automate it in some way? And then I think the last piece was, and I think the other skill I like to talk about is self-preservation.
Yes.
How do I actually, what fills me when the energy is drained? What do I know I can always rely on? What is that? And I'm talking about kind of, there's a book, Burnout, that I'm going over with some of the women in my coaching program. And they talk about not the stressor, but the stress response, and how that stress response, that if we don't close that cycle, that's what wears and tears and causes that allostatic load, that every time we deal with stress, whether it be microaggressions at work as women of color, that every time we deal with those kind of things, if we don't close the cycle either by talking to a loved one or breathing it out or exercise, if we don't close that, that is what is going to continue to cause that inflammation and stress. And so really talking through that as a protective measure for those that don't have autoimmune disorders, and definitely as a maintenance measure for those of us that do. And the last thing is community, honestly, right? Who's the support network? How do I get comfortable delegating, right? Because a lot of times it's hard. You're like, I can do that better. I'm just gonna get that done. I'm good. And it's exactly, and it's like, give it to somebody. It may not look the way that you wanted it perfectly to look, but it will get done. And I think also having a strategic partner and having someone to hold you accountable to, either as a personal friend, but also in those personal goals or professional goals, but having someone who really is invested in that vision that you shared with them actually happening. So I think those are the three things that I usually think are really helpful.
Okay, thank you. And then just a couple more questions. The next question I generally ask is kind of like, what tips would you give someone who's really just for the first time being diagnosed and having to deal with this for the first, they just like, it's kind of like a blank slate. They're like, I don't even know what to do with this.
I know. I think the first thing is to just, honestly, that first week, it was just like, just sit, just be still, understand that you're still you. So it's more about less of doing and more of being, and just saying, okay, what's the book? What's the thing out? What is the normalcy that I can bring back when all of this has been so chaotic? What can I bring next to me that's normal? For me, it was literally just sitting down with my kids and just watching TV with them for that first few weeks. Or, it was eating breakfast together, or was reading one of my books, or watching Netflix together, or whatever it was. But just something that brings that normalcy that you get in those first few weeks, not thinking about what does I need to do? What about the diagnosis? How about these medications? What about this? I literally was my brain needed to just be and be still and reflect. And from that rest, I was able to be much more cognitively able to kind of think through next steps. But without that, I think it would have been extremely difficult. So that's the first thing I would say. I would say a lot of times people are focused on, what am I doing next? What is this? What about this? And I think the first thing is to take a week, a day, I don't know, whatever it is that you feel like you need to just sit and try to think about what are the normal things that are in your life, or the things that you can grab onto right now.
Yeah. Yeah, just getting comfortable. It is a shock. It does take some time to come to terms with it. And so, yeah, getting that place of mindfulness and that awareness, getting calm in the system, and then slowly, like, what
Yeah.
can I do? Getting
Yeah.
that.
I will say, April, I actually had started yoga
Mhm.
during my thing, and I really loved it. I had always poo-pooed it because in my exercise, I was very interested in Zumba and African dance. Those are the things. So I was like, yoga, I'm going to fall asleep.
Yeah.
Yoga. And it was so centering to be able to like understand that it was just about me breathing and just about me, um, stretching and moving my body in ways that were helpful for the MS diagnosis, definitely, but still able to feel like at the end I was kind of clearer. So that definitely for me also was something that was actually really powerful.
Yeah, that's an amazing feeling. I had stopped doing yoga after the shutdowns and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just for various reasons, had all these mixed feelings about it. But I did yoga a few days ago, and I forgot how wonderful it feels afterwards, how calming, and how I don't even know how to explain it. It's just the
Yeah.
relaxation, and it's it's something else. Yeah, it is definitely,
Yeah, right.
it's definitely worth it. Yeah. All right. So tell us more about how we could get in touch with you if we want to learn more about your work. And
Yeah, yeah. So I am. I have two types of work. So if you're in New York, right, and you have a child, I still am an active pediatrician, and I run I'm the owner and co-founder, with my other two partners of Strong Children Wellness, and we work specifically in Queens right now, but we have telehealth services for anyone in New York State. The other passion of mine, my coaching work, is specifically catered to Black women physicians who are feeling either unfulfilled, stuck, burnt out, confused, really feeling like they have a bigger purpose but just aren't sure where to start, or feeling like they may not have a bigger purpose and it's just they can't live life the way that they've been living it. And so that's my repertoire, that's my niche. And I help women in that way. And I do that under my business, Melanin Medicine Motherhood. So to find out more about that, you can go to www.melaninmedicinemotherhood.com. And I think my Instagram handle is that at Melanin Medicine Motherhood. And in LinkedIn, I'm Omolara MD. And then in Twitter, which I like to do Twitter a lot. I like to tweet a lot. I'm Dr. Omolara, Omolara. So I have different things, but you can find all of that at my website, melaninmedicinemotherhood.com.
great. Thank you so much, Dr. Omolara. I really appreciate that you were here today on our podcast.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure. And I hopefully honestly feel that, MS, while it is a life-changing disorder, it is life-changing both in positive, sometimes negative ways, but in a positive way of really helping you reset and rethink kind of how you want your life to be. And so I'm hopeful that those who are listening, that they also feel inspired to know that it is truly at the beginning. It's not the end.
I love it. It's the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Sisterhood of Limitless Living podcast, Season 2. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Look forward to having you join us in upcoming episodes as well, where we continue to talk about integrative wellness and autoimmune living our best lives, being our own best advocates. Feel free to subscribe on iTunes to the podcast, and we are also available on several other locations as well. For more information about Dr. April Moreno, you can visit aprilmorenophd.com. Take care.